The federal government has begun implementation of Oil and Gas Revenue Executive Order 9 in a move aimed at strengthening revenue management and boosting fiscal stability. Welcome to Business Point, where we extract the Nigerian economy and the government policies. I am Kike Lomo Okere. The Minister of Finance and the Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun, disclosed that an implementation committee has been inaugurated alongside a technical committee to enforce compliance and ensure that all oil and gas revenue dues to Federation are fully remitted into the Federation account. The development follows the inaugural meeting of the Implementation Committee held on February 26, 2026, in line with the directive of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to safeguard petroleum revenue and improve transparency in the sector. As part of the immediate measures, the federal government has directed NNPC Limited to discontinue the deduction of 30% management fee and 30% frontier exploration fund from profit oil and gas under production sharing contract. The government has also suspended remittance of gas flare penalties into the midstream and downstream gas infrastructure fund, pending further review under the new policy framework. In addition, the executive order introduces a transition to direct remittance of petroleum revenue by contractors into the Federation account, covering profit oil, royalty oil, and tax oil. A transition period has been approved to ensure alignment with existing contractual obligation and to maintain investors' confidence. While detailed operational guidelines are being developed, to support this process, a technical subcommittee has been established to deliver implementation guidelines within 3 weeks and to initiate a review of the Petroleum Industry Act to address identified physical and structural gaps. The subcommittee comprises key officials from the Presidency, Justice Ministry, revenue authorities, and representatives of state finance commissioners with support from the Budget Office of the Federation. The implementation signals a renewed push measures to reform tax administration and eliminate informal practice. The directive was announced in Abuja by the Executive Secretary of the Joint Revenue Board, Olusegun Adesokun, during the signing of the presumptive tax regulations at the Federal Ministry of Finance. The new framework outlaws all forms of cash-based tax collection and dismantled roadside enforcement mechanisms commonly used by subnational authorities, replacing them with structured and technology-driven systems. The policy is part of the federal government's broader tax reform program under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, aimed at improving transparency, fairness, and coordination across all tiers of government. Under the regulations, nano and small businesses with annual turnover of 12 million naira and below are exempted from taxation, while a flat 1% turnover tax is introduced for other categories within the informal sector. The framework also established a uniform structure for state and local government to tax the commerce sector, alongside the integration of operators into a formal tax identification system. The Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun, described the development as a transition from legislative approval to full implementation of tax reform enacted between 2025 and 2026. It says new system is designed to eliminate arbitrary tax practice, expand the tax base, and ensure equitable contribution without increasing tax rates. The minister added that the reform aligns with the government's economic growth targets, including plans to scale Nigeria's GDP growth trajectory and achieve a $1 trillion economy by 2030. Chairman of the National Tax Policy Implementation Committee, Joseph Tegbe, says the initiative marks a shift from fragmented tax practice to a more coordinated, transparent system. He noted that the informal sector, which accounts for over 80% of the employment in Nigeria, has historically remained outside the structured tax net due to systemic inefficiency. The new regulations are expected to formalize the sector, improve compliance, and enhance revenue mobilization without placing additional burden on small businesses. The reform follows the signing of major tax legislation in 2025, including the Nigerian Tax Act, which overhauled the country's tax framework and laid the foundation for the current implementation phase. The ban on cash collection and roadside enforcement addresses long-standing issue of harassment, leakages, and lack of accountability in Nigerian tax system. By shifting to digital and structured process, the government is targeting improved revenue tracking and greater public trust. However, enforcement at the state and local levels will be critical, as these tiers have historically relied on informal method for revenue collection. The World Bank Group has raised concern over a looming employment crisis across developing countries, including Nigeria, as millions of young people prepare to enter the labor market without sufficient job opportunities. In a policy block with Washington-based institution warned that demographic shift over the next decades could significantly strain economies, fuel migration pressure, and heighten security risk if urgent action is not taken. According to the bank, about 1.2 billion young people are expected to reach working age in developing countries within the next 10 to 15 years, while only 400 million jobs are projected to be created over the same period. President of the World Bank Group, AJ Bangas, described the growing employment gap as a major global concern with a far-reaching consequences beyond economic development. The institution noted that while global attention often focuses on immediate crises such as conflict and market volatility, underlying structural issues like population growth and labor market imbalance poses more enduring risk. The bank warns that failure to address the widening job gap will lead to increased irregular migration, social unrest, and pressure on public institutions, particularly in countries with rapid expanding youth population. It also observes that the issue has received limited attention at a major global forum, including discussion at the World Economic Forum, where short-term geopolitical concerns have dominated. To tackle these challenges, the World Bank outlined a job-focused strategy built on 3 key pillars. These include increased investment in infrastructure and human capital such as power, transportation, healthcare, and education, regulatory reform to improve the business environment, and expanded support for private sector growth through financing and risk reduction mechanisms. The bank identified priority sector with high job creation potential, including infrastructure and energy, as well as agriculture and primary healthcare and tourism and manufacturing. It stressed that micro, small, and medium enterprises remain central to employment generation in developing economies and require stronger support to scale operation. The institution added that by 2050, over 85% of the global population will reside in developing countries to future global growth, trade, and supply chain. It's noted that while investment opportunity in this market are significant, perceived and actual risk have continued to limit capital flow. The World Bank emphasized that with the right policies and investment, demographic growth could be transformed into an economic advantage rather than destabilizing factors. The warning underscores a critical challenge for Nigeria and similar economies with large youth populations. The projected mismatch between job creation and labor force growth highlights the urgency of the accelerating economic diversification and the private sector development. Failure to act could worsen unemployment and insecurity, while effective reform could unlock long-term growth and stability. Nigeria maritime sector recorded a significant boost in performance in 2025, with total cargo throughputs rising by 24.8% according to the latest operational report released by the Nigerian Port Authority. The report shows cargo volume increased from 103.6 million metric tons in 2024 to over 129.3 million metric ton in 2025, marking one of the strongest annual growth in the country's report history. Managing Director of the NPA, Abubakar Dantosho, described the development as a major milestone, positioning Nigeria as a more competitive player in the regional and global trade. Imports continued to account for the bulk of the cargo traffic at 59.2%, while exports rose to 39%, with transshipment and contributing 1.8% of total throughput. Containers traffic also recorded strong growth, rising by 25.7% to exceed 2.1 million and 20-foot equivalent units. Import containers surged by 32.8%, while export containers grew moderately by 3.1%. Transshipment containers recorded the most significant jump, increasing by 200%, reflecting Nigeria's growing roles as a logistic hub for West and Central Africa. Among the national ports, Lekki Port emerged as the leading facility, handling 40.6% of the total cargo. Onel Port followed with 19.1%, while Apapa Port accounted for 16.7%. Lekki Port also received the largest vessel, indicating a shift towards handling bigger and more complex cargo shipment. Overall, ship traffic increased by nearly 12% to 4,477 vessels. Liquid bulk cargo remained dominant at 54.7%, while containerized cargo accounted for 24% of total volume. The report highlighted improvement in vessel size, cargo diversity, and operational efficiency, suggesting gradual alignment with global maritime standards. The growth is attributed in part to ongoing government efforts to promote non-oil export and strengthening port infrastructure. Plans for the port modernization and the implementation of the National Single Window System are expected to further improve efficiency, reduce cargo delay, and enhance Nigeria's competitiveness in international trade. The strong cargo's growth signals increasing economic activities and improved port utilization. Rising export volume and transshipment activities suggest progress in diversification and regional trade integration. However, the dominance of imports indicates that structured trade imbalance persists, while sustained investment in infrastructure and efficiency will be key to maintaining momentum. Nigeria's net external reserve recorded a sharp increase of 50.5% in 2025, rising to $34.8 billion from $23.11 billion in 2024. Governor of Central Bank of Nigeria, Olayemi Cardoso, disclosed this in a statement attributing the growth to stronger external sector performance and ongoing policy reform. The Apex Bank noted that the increase reflects improved transparency in foreign exchange management, stronger investors' confidence, and higher foreign exchange inflow into the economy. Data from the bank shows that net reserve rose significantly from $3.99 billion at the end of 2023 to $34.8 billion by the close of 2025, indicating a marked improvement in the quality of Nigeria's external reserve. Gross external reserve also increased to $45.71 billion in 2025 from $40.19 billion in 2024. Representing a growth of $5.52 billion. The CBN stated that the improved reserve position enhanced Nigerian capacity to meet external obligation, support exchange rate stability, and strengthen overall macroeconomic resilience. The bank added that the current reserve level validates its policy direction aimed at stabilizing the foreign exchange market and sustaining long-term economic stability. It reaffirmed its commitment to maintaining adequate reserve buffers, ensuring liquidity and supporting orderly market operations. The sharp rise in the net external reserve signals improved confidence in Nigeria's foreign exchange framework and macroeconomic management. Higher reserve provides a stronger buffer against external shocks and helps stabilize the naira. However, sustaining this momentum will depend on continued foreign inflow, disciplined monetary policy, and broader economic reform. Depositors of the defunct Heritage Bank have appealed to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and the Central Bank Governor Olayemi Cardoso to urgently intervene in the recovery of funds. In a statement issued in Lagos, the affected depositors called for full reimbursement of all outstanding deposits and immediate financial support to Nigerian Deposit Insurance Corporation to accelerate payment. The group expressed concern over the delay in the liquidation process, noting that 2 years after the bank's closure, many depositors are yet to recover their savings. According to the depositors, only 14.2% of funds above the insured limit of 5 million naira has been paid, with an initial 9.2% disbursed in April 2024, an additional 5% paid recently. The ones that the pace of the repayment raised doubt about the possibility of full recovery, citing the financial hardship faced by small business owners, retirees, and other individuals affected by the bank's collapse. Depositors also called for prosecution of any individuals or entities found responsible for mismanagement or diversion of the bank's assets. They urge the central bank to review and fast-track the liquidation process, stressing that partial payments remain insufficient to address the scale of losses incurred. The group further referenced past intervention by the Apex Bank in supporting distressed financial institutions, noting that similar measures should be considered to resolve the current situation. They emphasize that timely resolution is critical to restoring confidence in banking system and protecting depositors. The situation highlights lingering challenges in the bank resolution and depositors' protection in Nigerian financial system. While the NDIC phased payments reflect standard liquidation process, delay risk eroding public trust in the financial institution. A faster resolution or targeted intervention could help stabilize confidence, especially among retail and small-scale depositors. Nigeria recorded strong growth in non-oil revenue in the first 9 months of 2025, with value-added tax collection rising by 34% year-on-year to 6.4 trillion naira. Data released by the National Bureau of Statistics shows that VAT revenue increased from 4.77 trillion naira in the corresponding period of 2024, reflecting improved tax administration and broader economic activities. Quarterly figures indicate mixed but strengthened performance. VAT collection declined slightly by 1.4% in the second quarter of 2025 to 2.03 trillion naira, but rebounded in the third quarter, rising by 10.66% to 2.28 trillion naira. On a year-on-year basis, VAT in the third quarter grew by 28.1%. Breaking down of third quarter collection shows local VAT contribution of 1.12 trillion naira, while foreign VAT stood at 680.23 billion naira and import VAT at 479.79 billion naira. Sectoral performance reveals strong growth in administrative and support service, arts and entertainment, as well as health sector, while real estate recorded a significant decline. Manufacturing emerged as the top contributors to VAT with 25.89%, followed by information and communication, as well as mining and quarry. Company income tax also recorded substantial growth, rising by 48% to 7.72 trillion naira in the first 9 months of 2025 from 5.22 trillion naira in the same period of 2024. Quarterly data shows that CIT increased from 1.98 trillion naira in the first quarter to 2.78 trillion naira in the second quarter, before rising further to 2.96 trillion naira in the third quarter. The third quarter figure represents the 67.19% increase compared to the same period last year. Domestic CIT payments stood at 1.21 trillion naira, while foreign CIT contributed 1.75 trillion naira, indicating strong inflow from foreign-related businesses activities. The combined performance of VAT and CIT highlights improved revenue mobilization, growing resilience in Nigerian non-oil revenue base. The strong growth in VAT and CIT signals progress in reducing reliance on oil revenue, improved compliance, digital tax system, and increased economic activities are likely driving the gains. However, sustaining this trend will depend on continued reform, expansion of tax, and maintaining economic growth momentum. Capital flow into Nigerian manufacturing sector declined sharply in the first 9 months of 2025, despite a surge in total foreign investment into the economy. Data from the National Bureau of Statistics shows that importation into manufacturing fell by 54.11% to $463.52 million, down from $1.01 billion recorded in the same period of 2024. The decline contrasts with a strong rise in overall capital inflow, which increased by 131.96% to $16.78 billion within the same period. As a result, manufacturing share of total capital importation dropped significantly to 2.76% compared to 13.97% in 2024. Quarterly data indicates mixed performance. The sector attracted $129.92 million in the first quarter, declined to $72.22 million in the second quarter, and rebounded to $261.35 million in the third quarter. By comparison, the sector recorded stronger inflow in 2024, particularly in the second quarter when it attracted over $600 million. Meanwhile, total capital importation into the third quarter of 2025 rose sharply to $6.01 billion, representing a significant increase compared to the same period in 2024. Industry stakeholders have linked the decline in manufacturing investment to persistent structural challenges. Director General of the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria, Segun Ajayi Kadri, attributed the trend to high production costs, macroeconomic instability, and infrastructure deficits. He identified key constraints to include foreign exchange volatility, inflationary pressure, unreliable power supply, and poor transport system policy inconsistency, as well as security concern. All right, this is where we call it a wrap on Business Point today. Join me again next time on Global Television, channel 365 on DSTV and 276 on Star Times. To stay connected, kindly follow us on all our social media platforms using @GlobalTVNG. Till I come your way again, I am Kike Lomo Okeri. I celebrate you all.